quick question. Is it okay to vote for figures I already have? Because I think that's what I'm leaning towards in the Mythic Legions All Stars 5.
DorkLair!
Welcome to another DorkLair collecting video. Today we're going to talk about the Mythic Legions All Stars 5, and the voting is underway. The emails went out this afternoon. If you're not familiar with it, basically what this is, 4 horsemen every year or so, they kind of like put out a vote so that the collectors can figure out which figures that they want to see reissued from previous waves. So this is great for new collectors because they get a chance to pick up something that they don't have yet, which is awesome. And they're doing it a little bit differently this year. They've sort of divided them into these groups or groupings, and you get to vote for one per grouping. In previous years, they just kind of laid out the 20 figures, and then you picked your top 6 or your top 4, and then they calculated the winners, and then they released like the top 4 and added a couple other figures into the wave. And so we'll see how this one plays out. There's also a heads pack this year, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Okay, I'll pull up my ballot now, and we'll take a look at what the options are. I have not yet voted, so here we go. Okay, so there's basically like 4 different categories. There's 3 figure groupings, and then there's the heads grouping. So let's take a look at this. So we got grouping 1. In grouping 1, we have Romulus, Calavius, Silverhorn Sentry, and Ballum. And none of these are Series 1 or Wave 1 figures. Romulus is probably, no, I believe the Silverhorn Sentry is the oldest of these. It was in the Covenant of Shadows wave, and then Romulus was in the Gladiators, the Colosseum wave. Calavius and Ballum were in Advent of Decay. There's a lot of Advent of Decay on here this year. So there's that grouping. You get to pick one of those figures, and we don't know exactly how they're going to do the vote, but I can speculate kind of like after we go through this stuff. Okay, and then the second grouping, you get to pick one of these. You have Borear, Gonks, Hagnon, Azar, Bromden, Fury Orc, Clavian, Ilgar. And I think Clavian and Azar are the 2 Wave 1 figures. Those are the 2 1.0 figures in the entire thing. Yeah, so there's no, so those are the 2 oldest, Azar and Clavian. Now, Azar's brother just got a reissue in All Stars 3, which actually dropped about a year ago. And you have Borear, Advent of Decay, Gonks, Advent of Decay, Hagnon, Advent of Decay, Bromden, Advent of Decay. Fury Clan Orc was, I think, Soul Spiller wave, and Ilgar is one of the older ones. This was a Covenant of Shadows figure as well, or a 1.5 maybe. This might have been a 1.5 figure. Next up, we have the third grouping of figures, and these are almost all Advent of Decay or later. Grisha, Nubnik, Azza, Vampire Knight, Shadow Elf Warrior, all of those were Advent of Decay. Cassia was from Wasteland. The Elf Ranger might also have been from the Advent of Decay, and then Faustia was from either Soul Spiller or one of those post Advent of Decay waves. And then there's an extra Faustia in here. That's just like an error, I guess. And then next up, we have the head sculptures. Now, the origin of this is back when Sir Gerard first came out back in November, I think it was. It had that exclusive head sculpt with it. And I think they kind of responded to some of the fans' reactions to saying, hey, you got this exclusive head sculpt. You guys don't really do exclusives. And they decided that they would put that head sculpt, at least the sculpt, back out in a heads pack kind of thing. And they kind of teased that a while back. And so now we're kind of seeing the fruition of this. I don't know if the Sir Gerard head is going to still be in there. It's, that head is basically the scapular head. I would like to see that, more options of that, maybe a different color. Once they released the regular Sir Gerard, it actually ended up coming with that head. So I'm not sure if that's still going to happen. I don't see why not, especially if it's going to come in a different color. But for the heads, and these are going to be painted in a different deco, a new deco. We have the vampire head that was also released on the Lord Dragul in sort of like Hordak colors. And then we have the Zazar head, the demon head that's also on Azar. So those 2 share the same head, and this would be a different colorway. Elf from Thalen. So this would be a repaint of the Thalen head. We have the Gladiator head sculpt from a figure that's actually on the list, Calavius. We have the Dwarf head sculpt, and I believe that Jorund is the only one with this particular head sculpt. It's a unique head sculpt to that figure, so I'm very much hoping he wins this one. Mighty Warrior, everybody's popular favorite Magnus, is a great figure, and that a repainted version of Mag. I'd love to see like a like an older guy, like a gray hair guy or something. Jagualian is the cat head that we've seen a bunch of times. We've seen it on Balam, and we've seen it on Kauros and Purplor. And then we have the female knight head again. This head has been released on a couple characters too. So for me, I'm hoping for the dwarf. So there's your rundown. We have 3 different groupings. You get to pick 1 character from each grouping. We don't know how they're going to calculate them though. We know that they're going to use our votes to determine the winners, but we don't know that 1 per category, the 1 victor per category is going to be it. And we're going to have 3, and maybe they're going to throw in another figure of their choice. Are they going to do the Masters of the Universe tributes this year? Usually with the All Stars, we get 2 Masters of the Universe tribute figures. Or are they going to do are these groupings secretly like weightings? Like do like certain groupings have different weights where they're going to use it to determine, or are they going to take the top 2 from each group and maybe do 6 characters? I don't know. I'm not sure what they're going to do, but it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Okay, so let's talk about different theories or concepts to approach the way that you vote. And I'm going to talk first about voting for scarcity, like figures that are just out there that are just impossible to find. There aren't a lot. Like I was thinking like Halmir might be in this, or Bothar, or some of those older dwarfs that are just like super hard to find at this point. I was even thinking they might throw some crazy curveball and put some of the tribute figures in. Maybe they would put Rhaegor in there, or even one of the Masters of the Universe tribute figures. For some reason, I was just expecting some big surprise. Maybe that's still coming. Maybe that's coming after the vote. They're going to slide in some crazy awesome character. Maybe they'll do like a 2.0 character, or some other kind of really mind-blowing thing. But right now, as far as these selection goes, none of these surprised me. All of these are kind of oh, okay, these are what I sort of expected, like this type of thing. But there are some really hard to find ones in here. Starting off particularly, and again, this is kind of why I asked that question, Romulus is awesome. This figure is so good, and it's so hard to find. You cannot find a Romulus for under $200. It's not a figure you can get. You can find Calavius for probably $100. You can find Balam for 100. Silverhorn Sentry might be tough. That's a really old figure at this point. So that's another one. I don't own a Silverhorn Sentry, and I'm not super familiar with it, but that's another one that's probably really hard to find at this point. And yeah, so we have Silverhorn Sentry and Romulus as, in my opinion, the 2 really scarce ones of this wave, of this grouping. And then in the second grouping, I mean, the bottom 2 guys, Ilgar and Clavian, are probably the scarcest of these. I guess Azar as well. Azar was on my list of ones I really want reissued, but now that I have to pick 1 from among these, this is the hardest grouping. I'm going with Romulus. Romulus is just too awesome not to have a reissue. So I'm going to vote for Romulus and hope he gets put back in. I'll be happy with any of them, actually. But then when I get over to the second grouping, I still am not entirely sure. My gut tells me I want to vote for Ilgar because of the really just the awesome, super gritty paint job on Ilgar. But Calavian's armor, I mean, we don't really see a lot of chromed out figures in Mythic Legions. And I would really be happy with any of the other ones. And I really want Azar, but do I want Azar instead of Clavian? Do I want Azar instead of Ilgar? It's a tough decision. But I would say probably just straight up the hardest figure to find right now is probably Ilgar or Clavian, and then Azar. And then the rest are not too bad. Bromden's amazing. Value-wise, I feel like some of the newer figures have better value in the package. But as far as just scarcity, Ilgar, Clavian, maybe Azar. And then next up, we have the third grouping, which none of these strike me as particularly difficult to find, or more so difficult than others. Grisha's awesome, super unique head sculpt. yeah, I can't really figure out which ones of these are harder to find than the others. You could probably dig through eBay, but it would take a lot of like individual figure searching to find out which one is, how many have fewer listings or something like that. And then as far as the head sculpts go, easy. The dwarf head, this Joran Rune Shaper head, is by far the hardest one to get at this point. None of these other ones are too bad. The demon head you can get, you could just go buy a Zazar for probably $60 right now and just repaint it if you wanted. The vampire head had a recent reissue. The elf head, that might actually be kind of tough. Like that Thalen head, I don't remember if that's somebody let me know in the comments if that head has been seen on other figures. The gladiator head's tough, but Calavius is not that hard to find. Magnus, not too bad. Yeah, the only one here is the dwarf head. If I were voting specifically on scarcity, I'd be voting for the dwarf head here. I'd be voting for, I don't even know who I'd vote for in the third grouping. In the second grouping, I'd be voting for, I think, Ilgar if I were voting by scarcity, and then Romulus if I'm voting by scarcity there. Next up, let's talk about like custom fodder and which ones make for really good like part swaps and stuff. And as far as I'm concerned, I've been really wanting extra Romulus parts. So I'm sticking with Romulus here in terms of customs because the paint job is so good. I don't think Romulus is a good custom figure. I think it's a good kit bash figure, especially those boots with the gold and the black. There's a lot of good options to use his parts on. I think Balam is great because he's a straight up knight. So you take that cat head off, take the tail off, and pop his knight head on there. And that's a really good one for like army building and stuff. Silverhorn Sentry's an army builder, has an alternate head. Calavius has an alternate head. I don't think a lot of people realize that Calavius is a pretty sweet figure when it comes to like stuff they come with. Usually the more recent figures are packed out a little better, but that head is awesome. That's probably my favorite head for helmeted heads. So yeah, I mean, but I'm still going with Romulus for kit bashing and stuff. I want Romulus. I've even been mentioning it recently. I did my King Bromden mashup with Magnus, and that one I was like, oh, I wish I had some extra Romulus parts. I would totally use those legs on that figure. For kit bashing and part swapping, for just like fully like loaded figures, my toss up here is probably Bromden or the Fury Clan Orc. I love those two. The Fury Clan Orc is amazing for kit bashing. Bromden is amazing for part swapping and doing like just making a few different like you could army build him. He's got that alternate head. He's pretty sweet for that stuff. Really, any of these bottom four would be great for kit bashing. Hagnon's great for customs as well. I mean, he's essentially an unpainted figure. And Borear and Gonks are essentially dwarf bodies. So there's a lot of fun stuff going on in these. But if I were going to go strictly for part swapping and kit bashing, I'd probably go with the Fury Clan Orc on this wave. And then finally, for this wave, in terms of part swapping and kit bashing, I love the goblins. Nubnik is my favorite goblin. So having extra goblin heads and parts and stuff that Nubnik comes with would be pretty awesome. So I'm voting for Nubnik. The Vampire Knights and the Shadow Elf Warrior are also great. I love the paint schemes on those ones. And the Elf Ranger will go really well with the Elf Deluxe Builder Pack that's coming out this year. So that's actually a pretty good option for that. And Cassia would go good with that as well. She'd probably go good with the female orc or elf pack. The head's not really applicable for like kit bashing. It's just one part. It's just one head, I guess. Finally, for like just another strategy for voting and what I would suggest people do is to vote on their favorites. Like just vote on what your favorite figure is, whether that's like the figure that I want that I don't have yet, that's like my favorite want, or whether that's just like your favorite figure that you think is awesome, go with that. I don't tend to vote specifically on figures that I don't yet have. I tend to vote on figures I really like because I'll buy extras. I'll get extras of figures that I really like. If I really love a figure, I'll find a way to army build them. My number one figure in this entire thing is Romulus, and I know I already have it, but I am voting Romulus. That is my favorite figure in the whole thing, not just in the first grouping, but the whole entire thing. My favorite is Romulus, but I'd be happy with any of these. These are so awesome. Calavius is another like top 5 figure for me. Like This grouping is really tough, but Romulus takes the cake. And this next grouping is really tough. And I think I'm going with the figure that has been snubbed so many times, and that is Ilgar. I'm probably going to vote for Ilgar. He's one of the hardest ones to find. I really love his paint job. He's just such a cool looking figure, very unique. Clavion's right up there with him because of that chromed out armor, but I mean, I also want Azar. Like I want the companion to Zazar. I don't know. I think I gotta vote for Ilgar. I don't know. I really want Azar, but I think Ilgar it is. And what's not showing here is that alternate head, that bearded head. So there's another option there for Ilgar. And finally, my favorite figure in the third grouping is Noobnik. So I am voting for Noobnik. He's one of my favorite goblins. He's also, fun fact, the very first figure I reviewed on this channel. If you want to watch a really early embarrassing video, then watch my Noobnik review. And then for the head sculptures, I know for a fact I'm picking the dwarf, and I'm trying to pick the second head. I'm trying to think what would be a cool option to have like a repainted version of another head. And I think I'm leaning towards Magnus on this one. Or maybe I'd love to see what they do with another version of the cat head. I don't know. But I would really like to see like a gray-haired Magnus or some other kind of version of Magnus. The vampire is really cool, but I have a couple of those already. I also have a couple Magnuses, but yeah, I don't know. I think I'm voting Magnus. I don't really need more of these gladiator heads. And I think the female knight head is actually in the new, I think it's like they painted it like an orc in the new female orc pack that's coming out soon. So yeah, I mean, the female elf would be good. Be cool to see something almost Lord of the Rings-esque. But yeah, I think I'm going with Mighty Warrior and Dwarf on those head sculpts. Okay, so I'm going to lock these in. These are my votes. I'm going with Romulus. I'm going with Ilgar, Noobnik, and for the head sculpts, I'm going with the Dwarf and the Mighty Warrior. And here we go. I'm going to submit my choices now. Anyway, thanks for watching my video. Let me know what your picks are in the comments below. And until next time, may the force be with you.